Welcome back. It's Morning Express here on KTN, and we do say thanks for your feedback in regard to drugs and alcoholism in just the past hour. And now in the next few minutes, we are going to be speaking to a psychologist. You know, normally when we talk about psychology, a lot of people maybe think about counseling. They think about going either to see a specific psychologist to talk about their issues or a situation that they're dealing with for them to be able to get help. But how about you being able to detect this yourself, read the situation yourself, and find the solution to it yourself? And that is part of the psychology that we are talking about. And joining me in studio is Alan Kimani, who is a psychologist, and he's going to be telling us how we can apply our psychology to deal with the Kenyan society that we live in today. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really well.
In simple terms, what is psychology?
Psychology is basically the study of the function of the human mind.
Of the human mind?
Of the human mind, more with a focus on like behavior, because that's where you tell what's going on with a person.
All right. So as a psychologist,
Yes.
what does the human brain, the human mind think about for the better part of 24 hours in a day?
Well, I don't know where this research came from, but someone seems to say that we have 70,000 thoughts a day, you know. So basically what we do is we look at people's thoughts, we look at their states of mind, you know, their emotions, feelings, and to a large extent we also draw conclusions from their behavior as to what is going on in their minds. Yeah.
So the things that go on in our minds are not specific, because, you know, sometimes I've read somewhere that the human brain or the human mind thinks about certain things, at least for the better part of the day, and those carry the bigger percentage.
Okay.
And one of those is living the good life.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know, coming from you as someone who deals with these situations on a daily basis,
Yeah.
for instance, what do Kenyans think about the most?
Ooh, what do Kenyans think about the most? From my little experience, or should I say whatever degree of experience I have, I think a lot of Kenyans deal with a lot of stuff, but don't necessarily want to or can't structure it enough to take it to somebody else to help them with, you know. Kenyans have a lot of problems. I mean, we're one of the poorest countries, we're one of the poorer countries in the world. So obviously a lot of, like you're saying, survival, living a better life, improving your lot in life and that kind of thing. So yeah, that would, and then obviously there are the normal problems of living, such as what do you do with the little income that you have? Oh, go drink. What do you do? You know, that kind of thing.
Right. So in your normal everyday work, you know, we all have something that we do, and yours is to read people's minds or understand their thoughts and try to read situations out of them. How exactly would you describe your job to a normal Kenyan, you know, because psychologists are very few in this country?
Counselors and psychologists are on the increase. Yeah, we're growing in numbers. We don't actually read minds. That's like telepathy or some psychic sort of power or something like that. And I'm sure there are people who do that. But really what we do is we apply psychological theories, methods, techniques to help people better deal with their emotions and thoughts, and to actually improve their quality of living, and to get, you know, to live better.
So when you say situations, when you say feelings and emotions, how many have you dealt with? What sort of emotions have you dealt with in the past? I don't know if you're even allowed to disclose that. But
what I can't disclose is the specifics of the clients that I've dealt with. But in terms of experience, I think I've had like, 20,000 hours of working with people, you know, sitting face-to-face contact, that kind of thing. And what happens over that is, over that course of time, is that you get to, it gets easier to say diagnose certain problems because you've seen it over and over again. It gets easier to apply the theories because you start getting a sense that people are, you know, all people are different, and you can't just apply one solution, like a law, for example, onto all the people who have broken that particular law. When you're working with psychology, there's a method to how you apply your knowledge to dealing with different people. So there's an element of an art, if you will, to that as well.
Who are the most difficult people to deal with in your line of work?
Some of the most difficult people to deal with, in my experience, have been some categories of addiction. Some have also been women in domestic violence situations. And in some cases, certain family issues tend to bring about, tend to make it more difficult to deal with or to help them.
All right.
Yeah.
So how easy is it when someone can easily study another person's personality? How easy does it get? For instance, if I want to manipulate you, what do I need to know?
I think it's, first of all, most people who are probably going to be manipulative or would want to do that to begin with are probably not very decent people. You know what I mean? There is some truth.
I am decent.
Yeah, I know.
Very
but
decent.
there's some truth, though, to the fact that psychology, because of the knowledge that you have, you can shape and guide a situation and that kind of thing. But again, most psychologists are people, as a personality type, we're called the helping profession. So we tend to be people who care too much or give too much of ourselves and that kind of thing.
Yes.
But if I wanted to, I suppose, with a certain amount of experience and knowledge and ability, I can. You know?
All right. So normally, when I was in school, we did very brief psychology units, and some of them were things like personality tests. And personality tests, they say, helped build the brain to know what the response is going to be from someone else.
Okay.
So you ask a question, but you already know what they're going to say. And so you can easily read someone's personality, easily probably even read what they're going to tell you at the end of the day. How do you even
basically
classify that?
Yeah, basically what happens in psychology is when you're practicing psychology, you don't really want to, it's like law, like how they teach lawyers. You don't put your witness or your person on the stand, ask a question and you already know the answer, because then it's, I don't usually ask questions or ask for information to which I have a reasonable sense of what the answer might be. Rather, what I would do is take the information that I have and the question that I'm wanting to find out from you should somehow be based on that information, but I still don't know. Like, for example, if I wanted to ask, what was your middle name? I'm assuming that, like most people, you have a middle name. Yeah,
I do have a middle name.
That kind of thing. I've already put I've already put a couple of things together. You have a middle name, your typical Kenyan, etc. Then you ask that kind of question. But I don't go out and ask for a blind question like, how much did your engagement ring cost? Something that you're likely to not want to share. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know for sure there, it's that line of questioning is going nowhere.
Okay, any questions you have about psychology, the perspective, the personality, and the emotions, any questions, absolutely any questions you would want to pass on to Alan Kimani, who is a psychologist, you can use the SMS line 22155, or you can tweet me at Joy Doreen Bira or at KTN Kenya, or you can use the hashtag Morning Express KTN and let's talk psychology. Usually it's not a very easy issue to deal with, especially when people don't understand their personalities, and there are a lot of people that don't understand their personalities in Kenya. Some of them are corporates, some of them are younger, maybe the school-going undergraduates
why don't
and students.
We rephrase that? Instead of saying they don't understand their personalities, they don't understand the value of what psychology, how it can help their personality.
Let me put it this way. Sometimes we have people who say, when you ask someone, what do you want to be? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Of course, that plays a role in your personality. Your personality determines what you're going to be in the next 5 years. So normally, if people don't have an answer to that question, or at least what they want to be in the future, then you know that there's something that's not really right about their personality. Probably they're having issues with self-esteem. They're probably having issues with decisions, making decisions.
Focus.
And focus, exactly.
Motivations.
So how do you deal with people in that state of mind?
I do some amount of that. I think what it is that in my role as a psychologist, what that person, a person presenting to me like that, for example, is a person who's not so much without a motivation or not so much without a sense of ambition or direction or whatever, but it's really about taking them as raw material, and me as a psychologist using my ability, if you will, to use a metaphor, to cook that person into a finished product so that they would be able to articulate what they want, where they're going to, and so on. Because at some point, and this is what I believe, everyone has a direction, everyone has something. More often than not, it's the inspiration that we lack, that one thought that turns everything around and makes it so that a person can actually be able to articulate that. Once you can bring a person to a place like that, then you will have applied psychology, then you will have made yourself useful, and in turn help that person become useful, not only to themselves but also to others, because they have a forward movement.
So when someone asks for an appointment with a psychologist, later on, what do you as a psychologist aim at helping them achieve? That when they walk out of your office, they're going to walk out after having made a decision to do something.
Or sometimes people come to a place of clarity, which then in turn leads them to be able to decide. Psychology is one of those things which is, when you practice it, when one practices psychology, I should say, it's not just one thing that you're looking forward to. For me as a psychologist, first and foremost, it's a place where people can speak, okay? Because once you start talking stuff out, then you start listening to yourself in a way that you don't when your thoughts are going in your own mind, okay? Once you do that, then in the presence of another person, where it is a confidential kind of setup, it becomes easy for you to open up, to trust, and then you start bringing out more resources from within yourself. And then you start building strength, and then you start, it's like you generate this kind of force, whereas one train of thought becomes another number of trains of thought, and then you begin to build a solid kind of idea about where you want to go as a client. And as time goes on, you're also becoming more clear within yourself as to what you're doing, what you're talking about. It's kind of like rehearsing in your mind how a discussion or an argument or a confrontation is going to go, and then finding that it becomes different when you're actually there talking to the person. And that's what a lot of people are stuck in. You think of it, or we think of our problems in or our situations or our circumstances in a particular kind of way. But until you've actually spoken it out, literally articulated it, then you start seeing the inconsistencies, then you start seeing the discrepancies, then you start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. That is kind of what I do. That's
right. So normally I would like to know, there are people who feel so negative about themselves. They probably feel I'm not going to make it in this life. I'm not going to go farther than this. People have all sorts of thoughts that go into their minds. How does a psychologist help people with personality issues get back on track and say, look, and have a positive outlook towards life? How do you change their perspective?
Well, for starters, it has a lot to do with accepting the person for who they are and where they're at. I don't really want to manipulate you into thinking that because you're in my office and you're having to do this, that you have to come out positive. Okay, positivity at that point is just one of the outcomes. My job is to get you to open up.
Yes.
Once you let the light in, so to speak, it's like kind of opening the windows. The stale air goes out and the fresh air comes in, and then things start to change. In other words, I'm leveraging your internal resources. That's what I do. I help people make use of what they have inside of them. I'm not like Harry Potter. I don't have a wand. I do some uchawi, then next thing I do ting, and a star flashes.
And positive.
Yeah, and then there positive. No, the job is to take what you have, leverage it, just like a cooker. When you bake this thing called cake mix, the heat and the cake mix somehow But you as a cook, you're outside of all of that.
Yeah.
You're just a person who leveraged whatever, this ingredient, that ingredient, and put it together. And that's my role. It's facilitative in that regard.
All right, we have Caroline on the line. Caroline, where are you calling from, and what would you like to ask Alan?
Right, my name is Caroline. Calling from Nairobi, a clinical psychologist by profession.
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm glad you have that kind of evidence. And I think just to add on what you did saying, not necessarily asking a question, since I'm really a psychologist. The way it's interesting to understand your personality issues, honestly, one of the difficult issues for people to do personalities. And I think a lot of Kenyans embracing, a bit of companies and organizations are honestly embracing psychology in the sense that, say, for example, banks or late are succumbing their employees to tests in terms of personality, in terms of aptitude tests and the rest. So mental health is still not really embraced in Kenya per se, but we are hoping that with your media and exposure, then people are going to understand, honestly. Psychology is so huge. I'm a clinical psychologist, very different from counseling psychology, because, before going for a personality, then I have to do a math test to even understand what exactly I'm dealing with. So it's very new, but I'm happy guys like Alan and the rest are coming up to ensure that Kenyans get understand. And I'm happy that right now, for example, USIM data are going to graduate first batch of clinical psychologists with big numbers in 2016. Of course, University of Nairobi has been doing it, and that is very good. So let's continue greatly, because right now where we have Kenyans are honestly depressed, stressed, going through a lot of issues, and they don't understand themselves. But I'm sure that with embracing of psychology and specific areas, then we'll be able to deal with issues to do with personality and other mental health. So I'm glad that you're doing that.
Well, thanks a lot, Caroline. And we now have Samson on the line as well. Samson, good morning, and where are you calling from?
Good morning.
Samson.
I'm calling from Mombasa.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question for Dr. Ara.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a student in the Nairobi University Mombasa campus, and I'm studying psychology.
Okay.
So I wanted to know, should I actually study psychology as an applied science or a science, because I want to end up in the field of guiding people. So can you expound on that?
Yeah. Well, psychology is basically a science.
Yeah.
At the level at the level of study, it's mostly a science. When you practice psychology, then you apply psychology.
Yeah.
Okay? When you use the term applied psychology, you're actually being kind of broad, because anyone that uses any kind of psychological technique, a psychotherapist, is actually applying psychology.
Okay. So you are advising me to study it as an applied science, yeah?
Just take it for what it is. I mean, it will lead you to your goals. You said you wanted to work in guidance and counseling. Is that it?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Samson. And the previous caller, that was Caroline, she was actually just bringing out the fact that people need to develop their mental health.
Okay.
And developing mental health, where does psychology come into the picture?
I don't know if this is because my bias is that I have specialization in treating drugs and alcohol, but one of the areas where I've seen Kenyans, one of the cracks, if you will, through which psychology is starting to penetrate into Kenyan psyche is through the area of drugs and alcohol, because a lot of people are now starting to recognize that there is a huge role to be played by psychologists in delivering psychological services, not only to addicts but also to their families and to those who are affected. And I've actually had a number of clients come to me because somehow they have heard about the value of psychology, not by going on the internet per se, but by first-hand experience of, like, my friend's family had an addiction issue, they were affected, and I saw how the psychologist helped and that kind of thing. And therefore, it must be that whatever I have, maybe not as bad as addiction, but you can probably help me as well. I've seen a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone is saying, I've got an issue with my thinking. My boyfriend cheated, so I always think he does it every day. It's very frustrating. Do you have a response to that?
My boyfriend cheated, and I think that he cheats on a daily basis. Without getting too technical, my question is, when you say he cheated, what exactly do you mean?
I mean, come on, my boyfriend cheated, that means he probably slept with someone else.
Okay, if we're looking at it like that, chances are, unless this person is some kind of marathoner, they're not sleeping with somebody on a daily basis, okay? The way to begin to deal with this problem, I think, is communication. Bring it up with your boyfriend. Express yourself and your concerns to your boyfriend, not necessarily in an accusatory way, not by being a victim and manipulating him to feel sad so that he can, no, but just, this is how I feel, this is what's been on my mind. I can't make a way forward because this is a relationship between me and you, so we both need to come to some sort of agreement, so let's discuss and then move forward.
I think this person is having issues with trust. So,
that too?
Yeah, you know, her trust was broken, and then now she keeps thinking, okay, I think he's done it again. And as a psychologist, how would you treat someone with
cannot
trust
be
issues?
restored unless there's some kind of dialogue.
Okay, when you talk about dialogue in psychology, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the two parties in that situation, the boyfriend and the girlfriend, needing to come to some kind of place where they can sit down and clear the air to the extent that they can. The trust is not going to come from her herself. She can make decisions that she's either going to turn a blind eye or she's going to stay in the relationship regardless, but that won't change the trust level per se. It's only by talking to the boyfriend and endeavoring to listen to him and evaluate what he's saying and evaluate his level of commitment, will then something come out of that.
Okay. Send your questions. Some of them are getting too personal. I don't know if I should read them out, but I'm going to try and read them out here through our SMS line 22155. And also, you can use our Facebook page, KTN Morning Express, or you can tweet us at KTN Kenya, at Joy during Vera. When we return, Alan is going to be telling us the difference between psychology and counseling, if any. So don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and this morning we are talking psychology and why we need psychology in the Kenyan society. Also, if you have any personal questions that you would like to pass on to Alan Kimani, who is a psychologist, you can use our SMS line 22155 or our Facebook page, KTN Morning Express, and share your views right there. Someone is saying, this is Collins Omari from Kisumu. Can we link psychology to religion, since most people, especially women, open up to their spiritual fathers, pastors, reverends, whenever they have personal issues? Can we talk about this?
Yeah. That actually brings up an important part of the role psychology plays in Kenya, which is that a lot of people don't seem to be able to distinguish what psychology is and what, say, pastoral counseling is. Okay. From my colleagues who are professionals and also religious workers, I've been told that when you go to your pastor or whatever, by the time you've done spiritual counseling, prayer, and all that kind of stuff, that is usually a last measure a last ditch kind of measure. Not because it doesn't work, but because there are all these other psychological stuff that you need to go through first before you bring in the spiritual. What most Kenyans do, and I think maybe it's because we're a very religious and, deeply spiritual country, is we somehow feel that it should be the other way around, which sometimes creates a bit of a void, because if you're not meeting a psychological problem, or you're meeting it with a spiritual kind of solution, even though the Bible and a lot of religious texts do say that, the spirituality is everything, there's a spiritual solution to every problem.
Right.
There's psychological ways to get to some of those problems, which can sometimes be more effective than going to the spiritual at the very, as the first resort.
I'll give an example of the Catholic faithfuls.
Okay.
They normally go for confession.
Okay.
And this is done to a spiritual father.
Okay.
So when they air out when they air out their confessions, there's always a feeling that, there's going to be a response, and this response is said to be spiritual, as seen as coming from the father himself. So between a psychologist and a religious father, some people prefer to go to the religious father because, he tends to be giving them a more lenient response as compared to what a psychologist would do. Are there situations where psychologists just give their clients the responses that they want to hear, as opposed to laying the facts just as basic as they might be?
I try to be honest. I believe that since psychology does involve a lot of communication, that it is possible to communicate just about anything. I think it's about how you say it. Most people can hear just about anything. It just depends on how you approach it. And that's where I was talking about earlier, that in psychology, there's an art element to it, where you have to know your person that you're dealing with and how to go about communicating to them. But in essence, lying or manipulating somebody or bending the truth is probably not in my best interests. It'll come back on me anyway, because my client will go out there thinking that they've gotten the answer that should help them. Next thing I know is that this person has nothing good to say because I lied. I gave them, I overstated, I over-embellished, I overdid,
Right. So is there a difference between psychology and counseling and therapy?
The terminologies is a bit like this. Psychotherapy is any application of therapeutic methods. Psychologically therapeutic methods, and that can be done by nurse, psychiatrist, social worker, priest, clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist. All of that is psychotherapy, as long as you're applying psychology. Okay. Counseling is usually defined as helping people deal with the problems of living, the superficials, if you will. Like, for example, if I consult with somebody who is looking for work, and I'm helping them transition from being laid off or from into looking for a new job, that would probably be giving them counsel. Psychologizing at that is kind of like when you go deeper into the personality and you create kind of like structural change. Like, say the person who has depressive disorder and has always been a bit depressed because maybe they've gone through trauma and so on and so forth, and now working with them and helping them move into being the positive person that you were saying. That would be psychology, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. I'm a clinician and would like to specialize as a psychologist. What advice would you give me and the preferred college to study?
Oh, I can't endorse a particular university over another, because I've taught at both USIU and Nairobi University.
But do they have the same course outline?
Yeah, they pretty much meet the needs of a psychologist. I would probably suggest to that person that you need to think about doing more than just an undergraduate degree and go into graduate work, because this is the irony about psychology. A psychology undergraduate degree is probably not worth that much. But it's absolutely necessary if you want to become a clinician who treats people. You know?
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Someone here is saying, my name is Mary, a counseling psychologist student. Kudos for embracing psychology in the limelight. My question is, what is the psychologist? What do you think? What does the psychologist in studio think about his hair and the client's first impression, especially in Kenya? Actually, this is a very good question. I was just about to ask you the same thing because I was thinking, okay, so what is it about his hair? And how do his clients actually react to this? But thank God, someone has sent the question.
About first impressions. Would they be any different if, let's say, for instance, I was, I don't know, if I run my own business, which I do, right, and you came to my office seeking my services, I think impressions matter more in Kenya than perhaps in many other different places.
True.
Yeah? It would be sad if that person got lost in the impression that they think I'm creating and decided to imagine that I'm this, that, and the other, and completely forgot that there's a person who's behind that. And I've been through a lot of school and I've put in a lot of mileage, you know? And then you decide that my hair has to be a certain kind of way. I don't know what to say to you.
All right. It's a preference. If you ask me, I would say it's a preference because everybody's entitled to their own fashion and style. At the end of the day, what comes out of their minds is what really matters the most. My husband likes mpango wa kando. My worry is he always tells his girlfriends that he's not married or he had a disagreement with his wife and then chased her away. I feel my marriage is insecure.
Yeah, that is definitely a very insecure institution in the sense that, no, it's insecure in the sense that, number one, just the marital union by itself is already jeopardized.
Yes.
Yeah? But there are also a number of other issues. For example, all the things that this man could be collecting out there that he could bring home, you know? The amount of resources that probably should go towards a family. Let's assume that he's a breadwinner. And if he's out there chasing this, that, and the other, that compromises the quality of maybe education that he can give to his kids, the amount of attention. I mean, there's a whole bunch of duties and stuff that he's just not doing or could be doing that he's not doing because he's too busy doing what? Spending time, money, effort, energy into creating this facade and running after all these ladies and, you know, and then the risk of illnesses and all that stuff. She probably needs to take a firmer stance.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now let's get back to the lines, and we have a caller, Isaac. Good morning.
Morning.
Where are you calling from, and what is your question to Alan?
I'm calling from Eldoret, and this is my question to Alan. Yeah, I wanted to ask that what is the relation between psychology and the person who is insane? I mean, can a psychologist deal with a person who is insane and be able to manage him or her?
Unable to manage?
And manage him or her?
Yeah.
Herself. In other words...
Him or herself.
Okay. The relationship between psychology is that this is where psychology comes in and helps somebody make better use of, you know, or optimize themselves, so to speak. Yeah? This is where psychologists would help in terms of, to use a word, kuchangamka, you know, that person, you know?
Right.
That's
So does psychology, say for instance, help people? We have people who are introverts and extroverts.
Okay.
Does psychology help, for instance, the introverts be more open with the outside society?
Yeah, it does. Basically, psychology maximizes on what a person has, okay? Introversion and extroversion are generally thought of as an extrovert is someone who's outgoing, an introvert is thought of as someone who's not outgoing, okay? But in actual fact, an extrovert is somebody who gains, they restore and recharge themselves by being around people. And an introvert restores and recharges themselves by spending time by themselves or with a small group of people. Okay, either of those two people can manifest behaviors that can be seen to be extroverted and outgoing and that kind of thing. Even introverts like people. It's just that for an introvert, when you're dealing with people, you're always giving. So you need to spend some time by yourself to sort of recharge and then go out and
give again.
And give again, which is part of how you're made. Okay, extroverts would not be too happy being, say, behind a desk in a cubicle doing something that's very computer intensive, for example, without spending time with other people, because for them they're going to be drained much faster. Okay.
All right. So as we wind up, for people who want to get in touch with you, where do they find you? Do you have an email address, something like that?
My email address is alkimani@hotmail.com.
That's very hard to actually.
Okay, my number, is that easier? 0724 527 279 or 0738 684 165.
Okay. All right. If you need more information from Alan Kimani, we're going to be laying that out on our social media pages for you to be able to get in touch with him. So in case you're asking those questions of how we can get him and where he's located, you can be sure to check our social media pages. Now, I would like to wind up this time with you talking about the different personality traits. Which ones are more acceptable in society and which ones are less acceptable in society?
Generally, most societies, at least our Kenyan society, tends to like people who, there's a difference for men and for women. For men, there's a preference on men who are more outgoing, more kind of take charge and, fun-loving and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Ladies are somehow expected to be socially appropriate, but, not too out there. Don't let everything just hang out. It's a preference on it's also something that is determined by culture, because, for example, American culture tends to prefer both men and women to be outgoing, assertive, friendly, take charge. Like if you saw Hillary Clinton when she was here, from the minute she walked out of that car, sorry, we're late, traffic, she's a dignitary. She has no business apologizing about our traffic. Then she said about my hair, very take charge and, come into your own. And so that personality and how we manifest it is in part colored by the culture that we're in. All
right. I think there's a whole lot that we can talk about, but we can't talk about it all. We'd take all day probably trying to decipher what psychology is. But thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
I really appreciate the time.
And for enlightening us about the different traits of personalities that we have. But morning show comes to an end. We'd like to say thanks to everyone who has participated on the show by giving your feedback, and also to the gentlemen and ladies in the background who make this show happen. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Remember, it's going to be a Friday, and we're going to be having a whole packaged show for you, so you don't want to miss out on that. For now, God bless you and have a good day.